Titans just finished their second joint practice with the Atlanta Falcons, and it was a much better day. The Titans brought the juice. They brought the energy. It was exactly the kind of bounce-back day we needed to see from an attitude standpoint. Multiple fights. Cam Ward had a bounce-back day. We're going to talk about all of it right now. This is the Music City Audible. Let's get to it.
There's an imminent beginning here coming very quickly. We cut the roster down in, 2 weeks? It's coming. The season's coming, and we've got work to do still. We're not alone in that, but we got to get ready to go.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the Music City Audible podcast presented by Sinkers Beverages, the premier wine, spirits, and beer store in East Nashville in partnership with 440 Sports. I'm Justin Graver. With me, as always, Justin Melo. Justin, that was Brian Callahan speaking before practice. Not a lot of time between now and the regular season. Titans trying to get ready because it's coming, and I think they took a little step forward today after maybe taking a step backward yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, compared to Tuesday's practice, Wednesday's was much better by all accounts, especially for the offense. I think the defense, it was maybe a little dicey in spots, but they made some plays as well. But for what we're all invested in this year, it's Cam Ward and the success of this first-team offense. And by all accounts, they had a pretty darn good practice on Wednesday.
Yeah, let's talk about the energy, because this was the big talking point coming out of yesterday's practice was a decided lack of urgency, lack of energy. And Brian Callahan spoke about it in the press conference before practice, saying, like a fast start just means you made a few plays that you maybe didn't make the day before when it was a slow start. Like the difference between a fast start and a slow start is more the result than the process or the energy that you come to practice with. Like if you miss a couple throws, then it feels like you got off to a slow start. If you make those throws, it feels like you got off to a fast start. How much do you buy this? Because he's basically saying, like, it's not about the attitude or our approach to practice. It's just about if we made the play or didn't make the play. I feel like that's kind of a cop-out answer that's like maybe explains why there are some slow starts, but I will accept that they made those plays early in today's practice. So is the problem fixed because they got off to a fast start today? Like, to me, it's kind of like he's just saying, like, well, we're not really doing anything wrong, that leads to the slow start. It's just a results thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm somewhere in the middle. I think when I heard him answer it, I didn't quite think of it the way you did. You bring up a good point. I thought it was a slightly dumb answer because, I mean, when I was watching it live, I kind of went, well, duh, like, play good, that's good. Play bad, that's bad, right? Like, it's kind of a given that if you're starting slow, it's because you're not making plays and you're missing out on the execution part of it. I guess he's trying to say it's not a mentality thing. It's not an approach thing. It's not a laziness or work ethic thing. But, either way, you've got to start fast. And, yes, you do that by making plays. So you got to go out there and make the plays.
Right. And their response to that was to come out with more urgency and start a bunch of fights at practice. Like, that's another thing where I'm kind of like, that's a sign of an immature team. That was my first thought. And Austin Stanley of A to Z Sports actually tweeted something similar, that like the Titans' response to yesterday was to come out and just be chippy and like cheap shot the opponent and start a bunch of fights. But Easton Freeze reported that the Titans weren't necessarily the instigators on all these, that both sides were equally chippy and sort of frustrated with each other and causing those ruckuses to happen. It wasn't all just like Titans being, sometimes when a team's losing by 30 points at the end of the game and they start a fight in the end of the fourth quarter. That was my thought at first, but Easton says that's not necessarily what happened here. This is just a practice that had a lot more juice than yesterday. So I will take a step back from that take and say, okay, I accept that that's what it was. And it's that it is what you want to see, a team showing up with the energy and with that juice.
Yeah, I'm glad Easton had the follow-up because my initial thought was somewhat similar. It was like they talked about, like fake tough guy syndrome kind of thing. Like that was my initial fear when there's like 4 different fights at practice: O-line versus D-line, offense versus defense, special teams. Like Mason Kinsey started one of the first fights, for crying out loud. My initial fear was, team gets their butt kicked on Tuesday. They talk after practice about a lack of energy and they come out and start a bunch of fights. Yeah, it feels like fake tough guy energy to me. But, my concern was a little bit, calmed down by Easton's report that the Falcons were sort of equally as chippy.
Right. All right. I want to talk about what happened at practice. That's sort of what we do on these shows. That was the overall takeaway. The urgency was there. The bounce back that we needed to see, we saw for the most part. It doesn't make it a perfect practice day. The Falcons offense still made a number of plays. The Titans offense did too, but they also had a number of miscues that we're going to get into. So let's start with, I think the practice started in the low red zone, 7-on-7, where the Falcons kind of dominated the Titans offense. Now, I will say,
7-on-7, I don't count that. It's not real football.
But that said, Michael Penix found multiple guys open for touchdowns in the 7-on-7 red zone period. The Titans kind of did the same, though. The Titans offense had a lot of success in their low red zone period. And this is a period this close to the red zone, or this close to the end zone, I should say, in a 7-on-7. It's pretty heavily slanted towards the offense already.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that makes it so difficult to operate in the end zone or in the red zone in general is the condensed space, right? And when it's 7-on-7 and each side is missing 4 players, not so condensed, right? So there's a lot of open space to operate there. I did see the Falcons had, 4 or 5 touchdowns in that period, something outrageous. Kyle Pitts apparently climbed the ladder over Roger McCreary. That's a tough matchup for McCreary with his frame and arm length against a tight end of Kyle Pitts' size. So, but yeah, you're right. Like that, you played the Cam Ward clip 7-on-7, not real ball, but 4 or 5 touchdowns. I mean, I think you'd like to have seen the Titans D maybe do a little bit better than that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of notes from the guys at practice talking about the way that the Falcons are using Drake London and Bijan Robinson and kind of moving them around the formation, sending them in motion, and targeting specific matchups with those playmaker guys, which is the type of thing you'll see a team do in the regular season and not necessarily the type of thing you are prepared for in practice. You're not game planning necessarily to stop Drake London and Bijan Robinson or whatever. You're just, or should I say Bijan, because that's how you say his name now, apparently. But it's still something that it's good work for the defense to see. You'd love to see them make some plays. We did hear that I think Darrell Baker knocked away a pass in a later team period down in the red zone. So they are making some of those plays. And yesterday, Jeffrey Simmons was talking about in the run game saying, like, they're running a bunch of looks at me that we haven't seen before. Brian Callahan mentioned that too in his press conference, talking about Simmons getting whammed and guys on the offensive line targeting Simmons to take him out of the play. And Callahan's like, he's going to see a lot of that. That's the level of player that he is. Absolutely. And it's true. There's no game planning going on here. So some things that you would game plan for in a regular season matchup, the offense has the upper hand because they have a specific, something special about that play that gets a matchup advantage that the defense isn't even accounting for. So I'm kind of struggling with how to read this in terms of like, is the defense going to be terrible this season? We largely think probably, but that's more a lack of talent than it is like a lack of play in preseason practice or training camp practices, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think we've been questioning the defense all off season long, and there's been a lot of reason to question it at practice. In both of these joint sessions, against the Falcons, there's been a continuation of that. But I agree, you're not game planning. Although I did see on Drake London at one point, I think it was during the red zone period, one of the beat reporters said the Titans had like a linebacker over the over the middle of the field to help with a double coverage on Drake London because he had torched them so much on Tuesday. I mean, Brian Callahan said it this morning. He said, well, Drake's a really good player. And yeah, we had a tough time with him. He's going to make plays. So, I'm concerned about the defense, certainly more from a personnel perspective, specifically at edge and maybe depth corner. But you're right. You can't take away a lot of that from, 7-on-7 in training camp practice. It's more what we're projecting due to a lack of, high-end talent.
Yeah, I think Teron Davenport had this note. He said, it's interesting watching how the Falcons use Bijan Robinson to open up the middle of the field. He'll motion outside the numbers, taking the linebacker with him. Then they sneak Drake London on an in-breaking route to the area the linebacker left. Titans countered by having the cornerback line up outside and linebacker over London. So they're anticipating that movement. It's cool to see this little chess match play out in a practice setting. It's good experience for everybody, making adjustments on the fly, trying to take away something that the other team's doing well. So I just love those little interesting tidbits that come out of a practice, like a joint practice, because you wouldn't see that in a typical team, your same team type of practice or a normal training camp practice. Moving on to team period stuff, Titans offense really got the ball rolling after what would have been, I think, a 3-and-out. They were stuffed in the run game on 2 plays in a row, and then Cam Ward had to throw it away on a 3rd down rep that some Falcons beat writers said would have been a sack in a game, and then they slowed up so that he could just throw the ball away. But then Tony Pollard explodes for a long touchdown run. A few plays later, Cam Ward hits Calvin Ridley for a long touchdown over A.J. Terrell. Those are the kind of plays, the big plays. Somebody go make a play is what I was saying yesterday. Those are the kind of big plays that we're missing from yesterday's practice. Explosive touchdowns change games. And so nice to see the Titans sort of bounce back. You can almost look at like yesterday's practice was like a first half of a game. Then they go make their adjustments after practice, watch the film, come back second half of the game is today's practice, and it's like the Titans open the second half with 2 monster touchdowns. So you like to see that they're bouncing back. This is the bounce back that we've been talking about and that we wanted to see. So big explosive plays, and who else? Calvin Ridley with the long touchdown.
Yeah, you love to see. I mean, those are the 2 most important players on the Titans. 2 most important non-quarterbacks, obviously, right? Like playmakers on the Titans offense is Tony Pollard and Calvin Ridley. So for Pollard to gash them on the ground for a long one where he ran away from the defense in the open field. And then Calvin Ridley, I mean, he got the better of A.J. Terrell a couple of times on one-on-ones on Tuesday. What else can you say about him? I mean, A.J. Terrell's a really good cornerback, by the way. Like, in my opinion, a top 10 cornerback in the NFL, no doubt about that. So for him to get behind him during a team period and produce an explosive touchdown, you absolutely love to see that, especially when you consider the opponent.
And the Titans offense continued to have success in the low red zone team period, not 7-on-7 where they also had success, but in the team period, there was some incompletions, but Chigakonkwo scored a touchdown. James Prochet scored a touchdown from Brandon Allen, and James Prochet was making plays in this practice. He closed the move the ball period, moving the chains with a couple first down catches. So James Prochet pushing for a roster spot, but nice to see the Titans offense sort of just continuing to execute up until, I would say, one of the very last plays of the first team offense. I think maybe the last play of the first team offense was not good. We'll get to that in a second because we're talking about good things and continued execution in the red zone when you are playing 11-on-11, when it's not fake football or whatever. Good to see that is sort of is like a progression of continued success, Justin.
Yeah, Brian Callahan had talked about upward trajectory a couple days ago. They did some good work against the Bucs in the red zone, both in joint practice and I thought in the preseason game with Cam Ward leading that one 65-yard touchdown drive. So to me, this is just a continuation of the red zone offense getting better, just operating a bit cleaner and crisper down there, which again, so important because once the regular season comes, that's often the difference between wins and losses. And when training camp started, this is what their 15th, 16th practice, something along those lines of training camp. When it started, those first 5-6 practices, we kept talking about how much they were struggling in the red zone. So to me, that's one area. The practices have been a little inconsistent still. Yesterday's was a borderline disaster, but there's been some consistency, some improvement when it comes to the red zone, and that's really important to see.
Right. We'll get to the last period now, which was the full team move the ball period. The Titans defense this is where they stopped doing first team offense versus first team defense, and then vice versa, like on 2 separate fields. This is like at this final period, move the ball. It's offense versus defense. There's not 2 fields going at the same time. It's more like a scrimmage, like a mini scrimmage setting. And the Titans defense forced to stop on they were first up. Falcons offense has to punt the ball. Then the Titans offense comes in, and unfortunately they go 3 and out with 3 pass plays. And on the third one, it's not even 3 and out. It's 3 and interception because Cam Ward gets out of the pocket, tries to throw the ball away. We saw something almost like this in the preseason game, tries to throw the ball away and doesn't get it out of bounds. And the ball is intercepted. In the preseason game last Saturday, he did something similar. The ball bounced and landed in bounds near the sideline, but not out of the sideline. And, a Bucs defender was running for it and couldn't get there in time. In this situation, the Falcons defender does get there in time. I'm not panicking over this. This is a learning moment for Cam Ward, but it's a really important one to learn quickly because you can't go do this in week 1 against Denver, try to throw the ball away, and the ball ends up being intercepted. This is how Will Levis lost the Titans the Bears game because he was trying to throw that ball away, and it got pick-sixed by Tyreek Stevenson. So you don't love to see that, but I also think whether it's a good practice or a bad practice, you need to have plays where you can come away, go look at the film and be like, don't do this anymore, because throughout his career, he's going to continue to learn, but the more he can learn and condense that into the next 2.5 weeks before you go face Denver week 1, the better it's going to be to set him up for success this season.
Yeah, this shouldn't be that hard, right? Like, I don't think I'm oversimplifying it, but it's like, when you're trying to throw it out of bounds, you just make sure it's got enough air on it that's going to get there, right? So it's not something I'm super concerned about right now, because I can't rack my brain around this being difficult for him, right? Like, when you throw it out, you make sure it's decisive and you throw it out with some air under it. So, but clearly it is something that he's got to work on, because I agree that this is kind of the second one that he hasn't got enough on. And I am glad this one got picked off. He kind of got away with it in the Bucks one. Well, maybe it takes not getting away with it for him to be like, okay, I really got to make sure I put enough mustard on this thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's like, I guess there are learning experiences, but when it's like there are consequences to the mistake you made, then you can actually maybe learn from it. Justin, do you want to run through a few notes of, we had some different guys rotating in with the first team, some plays that were made by maybe some unheralded folk that we don't talk about as much from this practice that you saw?
Yeah, I want to talk a little about the first team defense, because there was a report that Cedric Gray was working with the ones, so at linebacker next to Cody Barton. I'm not going to take too much away from this, but I will say it hasn't been much of a competition so far. It's been James Williams all the way. In fact, if you told me that the first opportunity Cedric Gray was going to get with the first team defense was on August 13th, I would have been surprised, right? I expected a lot more back and forth between the two of them. This hasn't been the case, right? James Williams has been running away with this job. I don't take much more from this than they're just giving Cedric Gray an opportunity, because maybe they're even like, wow, it's August 13th on the calendar and we haven't really given him a shot with the ones. Let's give him that now, because remember, Frank Bush said about a week ago, it was typical coach speak, but he wouldn't concede that this wasn't a competition. We still got things to evaluate, still a competition. Well, he can kind of stick by that by giving Cedric Gray some reps with the ones, something to monitor going forward. Same thing happened at cornerback, where rookie corner Marcus Harris was working with the ones opposite Jarvis Brownlee on the boundary. So that means he stepped in for Darrell Baker Jr. at that spot, because, of course, L'Jarius Sneed is still on the pup. So, Buck Reising had tweeted at one point, Titans corners not named Brownlee and McCreary are terrible. Yeah. Easton Freeze tweeted a couple weeks ago something about like how bad the depth was at the back end of corner and the secondary in general. To me, this signals, kind of reading between the lines, a 6th-round rookie getting these reps, and then what Buck tweeted, what Easton tweeted a couple weeks ago, doesn't sound like Darrell Baker Jr. has been very good this offseason, right? Like, he was pretty good for them last year when he stepped into the Sneed role. It wasn't amazing, but he was good we had no expectations for him, and he didn't get them killed, right? Like, he was pretty all right. So, but it sounds like there's been some inconsistencies there. And not that Marcus Harris has done a lot better. Like, he's had a lot of opportunities this year with the second team defense, and the inconsistencies have been there. So they're trying to throw stuff at the wall, see what sticks at corner. It really just speaks volumes. And we've talked a lot about L'Jarius Sneed, but maybe we haven't talked enough about how badly they need him, right? Like, that corner spot is really, really concerning right now. Darrell Baker, Marcus Harris, neither of them practicing particularly well. And we said it yesterday, like, this is a spot where they're probably going to make a waiver claim. But at the end of the day, I don't know how much that's going to help. What they need is L'Jarius Sneed.
Yeah, I think Darrell Baker was noted, as I mentioned earlier, had a pass breakup, but you're 100% right, because it's not like the pass rush is going to be able to cover for, a poor coverage in the back end and make the quarterbacks have to get rid of the ball quicker and help that coverage. And at the same time, it feels like the coverage is not going to necessarily help the pass rush by sticking to their man and allowing those rushers to get sort of coverage sacks or late down sacks, which is not great, but it's kind of what we expect for this season. Like, we don't necessarily... The Titans aren't competing for a Super Bowl this year, and there are holes on the defensive side of the ball, and that's okay. Their goal this year, as you said off the top, was it's all about Cam Ward and his development. So if they have some holes in the secondary, if they have some holes at edge rusher, I think as long as Titans fans set their expectations appropriately, like, we can get through the season with this, and then hopefully you make those improvements, those roster improvements that are much needed next offseason. I don't have anything else to say. Like, I'm not going to bullshit our audience and say, oh, it'll be fine. Somebody will step up. Marcus Harris is going to be fine. Like, Marcus Harris got burned for a long touchdown today. I don't know. Like, the cornerback depth is bad. I expect they might churn that spot with waiver claims at the end of this training camp, and we'll see sort of where it goes from there. Did you have any other practice notes? I know Jeffrey Simmons had a sack. Arden Key had a sack. Was there anything else that stood out in practice today we should mention before I get to my last talking point here?
Yeah, a couple of good Cam Ward plays I think that we maybe mentioned in passing, but I want to highlight. There was like a really good throw to Alec Iomanor, I believe, on an in-breaking route. He followed that up with a good one to Van Jefferson. One of the touchdowns on 7-on-7 was Cam Ward to Julius Chestnut on a swing route. Sounded like the Falcons didn't pick him up coming out of the backfield. So Titans are not the only ones making mistakes out there to get a wide open back on that route. Swing route is an easy win in the regular season. You hope to see some of those. So overall, strong day for Cam Ward and the passing offense.
And since you brought up Cam Ward, I was going to mention this quote that Raheem Morris gave at the start of today's practice. He was asked, what'd you see from Cam Ward? What do you see from him? And it's always fun, I think, Justin, to get the perspective from opposing coaches on your team's quarterback, even if it's mostly like overhyped praise, because these guys don't want to become news for saying, like, going out and saying Cam Ward sucks. Remember Jalen Ramsey like 10 years ago saying every quarterback in the NFL basically sucked, and it was major headlines, and we still remember it today. So they're never going to say something totally negative, but it's still nice to hear them talk positively. So I clipped this Raheem Morris answer about Cam Ward.
Like, I wasn't necessarily studying him, but when you go back and watch it on tape, you see a young guy that's fearless. I love his attitude. I love his work. I love what he's able to do. Obviously, he's brand new. He's learning his offense. He's found out where he can fit those things in the windows. He got a lot of confidence in his arm, what he can throw and what he can do. So they got a bright future with the young man. And he's everything that was advertised. When you talk about the worker, and we know about that, that's legendary. So he's going to work at it and give you everything and his best efforts to go out there and get it done for those guys. I'm fired up to see those guys go. You can never really be overcritical of a guy in a practice setting like that. Like, those are unscouted looks. Those are all things he hadn't seen before. He'll have a better feel, better grasp today. So, I love it, man. It's practice, it is what it is. Those are the things that happen in those type of deals. That's why I like him so much.
I mean, that's pretty glowing. Is it overglowing, overhyped, too positive? No. I don't think so. What do you think? Am I crazy?
Raheem Morris comes off very genuine in that game, honestly. And I love Raheem Morris. I always have, and I wish him a lot of success there in Atlanta. It didn't feel fake to me, in all honesty. Like, the tone of his voice, the grin, the smile, like, just a guy who I think is up there telling it exactly how he feels about Cam Ward. Probably the kind of guy that said, you know what, like, if we had the number one pick this past year, I'm glad we did it. But if we had the number one pick and we were in a position to we needed a quarterback, didn't have Michael Penix, I think Raheem Morris would have been thrilled to take Cam Ward at that spot. So I'd love to hear that from one of the better defensive-minded head coaches in the NFL.
I have nothing else from this practice, Justin. I'm excited for Friday night's game. We are going to be back tomorrow to do a little preview of that, so we're not going to make this pod any longer. And I don't know, do you have any other final thoughts from this practice before we sign off today?
Yeah. Two quick funny quotes that came out right after it. When Arden Key was asked about the scale of fights at practice, he said, and I quote, this was tweeted by Paul Kaharski, "The piss got hot." That's what Arden Key said. I might get that tattooed on my ribs. That's a quotable if I've ever heard of one. "The piss got hot," Arden Key said. Michael Penix said, "They had a lot of words," in reference to the Titans, "during practice, so I gave them some of my words." And that's how some of the scuffles started. And then one that Titans fans are going to love to hear about was Calvin Ridley, as he walked off the practice field today, said, "We won today. Y'all write that." So that's how Calvin really felt, which is funny because Buck Reising a minute before that tweeted, "Not as flat as yesterday, better than yesterday, but no one would define it as good." Well, maybe that's a little bit negative, because Calvin Ridley a minute later walks off the field and says, "We won today. Y'all go write that."
Yeah. I think Calvin Ridley defines it as good, Buck. It's hard for these beat writers who are at practice because, again, most of the time they can really only focus on one side of the ball at a time until that final period. So maybe what Buck saw wasn't as good as what Calvin Ridley saw, especially if Buck was watching the Titans defense, get toasted by Michael Penix multiple times. But Yeah, I think this was a much better practice. That's my overall takeaway. My final thought here as we get ready to sign off. Much better practice. The energy that we wanted to see, the response that we wanted to see as the team continues, to deal with the adversity of being away from home, which I, again, think is kind of a bullshit excuse, but it's still something that they're dealing with. It doesn't mean it's okay to go play bad, but it's nice to see them play well when we know that that's happening because, again, Brian Callahan confirmed in the press conference this morning that he is trying to make it hard for them. He's trying to put adversity in front of them and see how they respond to it and force them to respond to it because the regular season is hard and football is hard and it's a long, grueling, 18 weeks of regular season action that the team's about to face. So they're trying to get ready for it. And I think they are making those strides. I don't necessarily think they're going to be a great team, but they're making strides towards being more competitive this year. And I think Titans fans should be pretty happy if that is the case. You have a final thought or do you want to just sign us off, Justin? Over to you.
No, I think that pretty much does it. I'll leave with a quick note of humor. In one of the fights, lo and behold, who had to be dragged away by a teammate? Jarvis Brownlee Jr. This is going to be an ongoing theme. That Jarvis Brownlee Jr. is a little bit nuts in the best way possible when it comes to a football player. But I just found that funny based on how much he's been active with the whole helmet stealing thing, trying to fight a fan. He said it bullshit on Tuesday. It was all right. It was always bullshit on Tuesday. Well, on Wednesday, he tried fighting someone else. So you should ding Jarvis Brownlee Jr. every time he does something nuts at practice. But that'll do it for this episode. We'll be back, I guess, tomorrow for a bit of a brief preseason preview, week 2 against the Falcons. We'll be back Friday, I believe, with a live episode, I think. Once that game ends, that's the way we're leaning. We went live last week. The feedback was great. You guys loved it. Graver and I are planning to go live Friday after the Falcons game concludes, I think. We'll confirm that and then get back to you guys tomorrow. But a ton of content coming your way over these next couple days. And y'all stay safe out there and tighten up.
A Broadway sports media production.